Okay, good evening, everybody. This is Walter Alcorn, Chair of the MBTC WMATA Committee. Good evening and welcome to our January 25th MBTC WMATA Committee meeting. And I'd like to note that we started the meeting at 6:01 p.m. So this meeting is being live streamed to allow our listening audience to be able to watch and listen through YouTube. So I ask staff, do we have a quorum present?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then let's go ahead and get started. I believe we will have an addition to the agenda, maybe just an announcements later today. So would you like to do that as an announcement? Or? Yeah.
Sure.
So let's do this as part of our opening.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm sure as everybody saw, Metro announced a bit of a painful summer shutdown in June that will affect the Orange and the Silver Line. This is for repair or actually replacement of rail, the actual rail. It is original to the system in that area, and it has shown a lot of cracks and frequent maintenance to the point where it needs to be replaced. One of the questions I'm sure people have is why that couldn't have been done when the previous shutdown occurred for the platform project. And the board asked this question. The answer is the platform project actually utilized the rail to move equipment, and they had to be pretty much throughout the system during the course of the shutdown on the track for that project. They are totally incompatible projects for different contractors for different purposes. So for a variety of reasons, they did not undertake that platform work. They didn't undertake this work at the same time they did the platform. So obviously there will have to be a significant bus operation to move customers between these two stations. The Silver Line obviously is impacted because there's no through service. The shutdown is longer for the Vienna section, and I think it runs from the 3rd to the 26th on the Ballston to McLean section, I believe it is. So it's obviously not good news. The only thing I'll say is we are trying to rebuild ridership. We have had a lot of positive momentum. So if you were looking for evidence that Metro is putting safety first, this is it, because this is the type of project that maybe in the past would have been deferred for political or timing reasons and shouldn't be. So it's being done.
And some of the timing of it as well is there's a lot of coordination going on with PEPCO.
Mr. Schneider.
So I think it's really important to communicate with the public, not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it.
So we have pictures in the board packet tomorrow that will be presented at the Metro board meeting and released to the media of the cracked rails. Now, it's a byline. You don't want to alarm people that the trains that they're currently riding are on cracked rails. But, it shows the particular pictures or pieces that have been temporarily fixed, but it shows the type of issue that is popping up with frequency.
What's the location?
The first stage is from Boston to McLean, and the second stage is from basically where the Silver Line peels off to Vienna,
Which is East Falls Church. So
yes.
The first piece you're going to do is Boston to East Falls.
I think is Vienna the intersection?
Boston to Vienna.
Vienna. Yeah.
Like 14.
Yeah, Vienna is
on the space radius.
Yeah,
Vienna is sort of like
Again, there it is right
there. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, there it is.
So the first part is the Boston to Vienna. Then the second part, the longer stretch that stretches it into July, is the section where it's basically West Falls Church. Vienna.
Yeah.
And I think in parallel to this, there's a bunch of weekend.
So the reason why it's being done, so the Silver Line, basically the bottom line is the Silver Line service as a through service starting on June 26th. But for the orange line from Vienna, that service won't be restored until July 17th. So it's another couple of weeks.
And Mr. Chair, just sort of administrative side of things, if folks can really speak up, some voices are a little hard to hear on the YouTube. Just got some folks who are listening in.
Thank you for that. Let me just ask, so Silver Line's going to be back full service June 26th?
That's the plan. Yes.
That's the plan.
Yep.
So by the July 4th holiday.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I guess was single tracking explored as an option, or I guess that's not an option here?
So we looked at a couple of scenarios, and it would have really extended the pain. If we did, there was a scenario that Metro looked at in which they only did the work on weekends, but you can't really do rail work like that anyway. Like you could do little pieces at a time, and then constantly it would have made for about months of weekend shutdowns. Single tracking, I think the issue is you can't work out in the track where that is with the type of work that need to be done and be running trains. It's just too risky. So you really have to clear the whole.
Yeah, and as Matt said, Walter, some of this equipment or some of this stuff they're repairing is original to the system, and you just got to dig it up.
Right. Well, certainly having ridden over that stretch many times, you can really tell when you go from the old track to the new track.
Yeah.
I mean, even from a rider perspective.
And and with a lot of these things, it's we just got to rip the Band-Aid off. I mean, there's no, because we don't have the third rail, it just complicates everywhere.
So my only other question is, I know WMATA is still running promotional ads for Dulles Airport. I would assume those would stop at some point before this.
Probably, yeah. We didn't ask, but
Yeah, I would assume you want to give at least a couple of months, so people can plan accordingly. Now, what about bus alternatives?
Billings desk. I mean, we're 6 months, almost 6 months out still. So I think the idea was to get the whole summer news out early, and then build from. I think generally speaking, 3 months before work is when the plans are usually announced for what all the alternatives are. So that would be the goal.
Yeah, and Walter, it's a different approach in terms of transparency, giving the jurisdictions ample time. If they have things that they're concerned about or want to plan around, they too
Very good. Any other questions? All right, thank you for that announcement. Slip that into the agenda. I guess I should ask, does anyone have any other announcements? Okay, then let's dive in.
Yeah, that's more than enough.
Yeah, I know.
Just check.
And I mean, look.
yeah, it's
You can
disappointing.
imagine,
Yeah,
like,
you
when,
can imagine.
when we got hit with this, we were like, oh. The good news is, I'll be careful about saying too much, but the good news is, I don't think that management anticipates there being any major disruptive maintenance events in the foreseeable future after this one. Like, the platform was really difficult. Obviously, the yellow line work really difficult. This is difficult, but after we get through this hump, I think what you're going to see is probably more of a regularly scheduled downtime over non-peak period approach, where you may see the system down in certain stretches for a week or so, between Christmas and New Year, and that may happen like every year because they want to avoid these situations where there's like this work that wasn't done for a decade, 2 decades, that all needs to be done at once. So I think Randy really wants to try to shift the way that maintenance like this is done, but we have to get through a couple of really big things before we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and emphasis on the how. Because there are efficiencies that he and others believe that can be had.
All right, thank you both. Appreciate that update. Okay, let's dive in. We do have our committee meeting summary from December 9th, 2022. It's the first item on the agenda. Do any committee members have any changes to the summary? Okay, don't see any there, so we'll move on to the MBTC WMATA Committee Overview and 2023 Plan. So it's January, it's the first committee meeting of the year, and this is generally when new committee members receive an orientation on this committee and the role within MBTC. However, there are no new committee members, so but the staff has still prepared a brief refresher to reacquaint our existing committee members and to provide a brief outline of upcoming activities. So the past year, the committee, as I think everyone here knows, has worked collaboratively to make sure that Virginia speaks with one voice on all of the related matters, and I think done so very successfully. Proposed work plan and schedule for 2023 momentum, and the proposed committee schedule, it may change if the committee needs to respond to any unscheduled or unplanned initiative or activities at WMATA. So at this point, I'll ask Renetta to present the slides, and we'll have an opportunity for questions or discussion. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair. We just, again, as Chair Alcorn mentioned, we wanted to remind the committee members of just the overview and scope and responsibilities of the NBTC WMATA Committee. The committee, again, was created by the Commission in response to the 2018 legislation. The committee's role is established in the NBTC's bylaws and consistent of two primary responsibilities. The first is providing consensus-based recommendations to the Commission on WMATA policy-related positions, and the second is providing strategic guidance to staff on WMATA-related policies and NBTC's responsibilities from legislation, namely the annual report on WMATA. The Commission provides monthly reports and discussion from Virginia members of the WMATA Board and the NBTC WMATA Committee Chair, and where needed, the Commission will take formal action on policy positions on WMATA. There's also a regional staff structure that meets frequently. NBTC coordinates calls with jurisdictional staff and WMATA board members to prepare all parties for WMATA board meetings. It's information sharing between board members and staff. And these calls help Virginia build a consensus on key issues and facilitates multi-jurisdictional representation from NBTC members of the WMATA board. So this slide shows our draft committee schedule for the year. The major topics are pretty standard. So the first will be work sessions on the annual report on the performance and condition of WMATA, and the second being comments on the WMATA budget. This year we'll also have additional NBTC efforts that we will be providing the committee updates on. So the first will be NBTC operating or WMATA operating funding work group, which will address some of the challenges with WMATA's operating budget, and the second will be NBTC's role of Metro Bus Study, which will look at local transit agencies assuming operations of Metro Bus service.
So, Renetta, if I could interrupt, I just want to make sure that folks watching can see the slides.
Yes, they can. Actually, what's being shown on Renetta's laptop right here is actually going out on YouTube. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so that's what
Very
we're working
good.
on.
All right.
And you have printed copies in front of
I
you? So I think she's on, what's like 4
Keep
or
on
5.
going.
Yep. Yeah, so we have also providing possible comments on the selection of a local preferred alternative for the Blue Orange Silver study, as well as a second public engagement period on the Better Bus Network redesign, where Metro staff will seek input on draft bus network options. For additional updates or content from WMATA, we will work closely with Greg and WMATA staff on the right timing for these items. And with that, I will pass it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent, concise summary. So good that I didn't finish eating. So let's just see any committee members with questions or comments on that, and also on any of the major activities anticipated during the coming year.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just
Yes.
we do have, there's a number of different sort of parallel things that are going on one of which would likely be working closely both with this committee as well as actually our program advisory committee is, and you'll have an action on this next week, which is we are doing a regional, Northern Virginia regional bus analysis. So that's looking at how buses serving Northern Virginia. That is something we're actively working with WMATA as they do their better bus design. So these efforts will be folding in. Just wanted to let you know. So ours is sort of a deeper dive on the Northern Virginia side, while WMATA is doing their WMATA report. So these things are not being done in isolation. Just want to let you know that.
Excellent. Any other comments, questions? All right, then let's move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is discussion and comments on WMATA's proposed FY 2024 operating budget and FY 2024 through 29 CIP. So we're going to hear a presentation tonight and discuss comments on the WMATA GMT's proposed FY 24 operating and capital budget. So after that, staff will then draft a letter to be shared with the committee for review. And then once it goes from this committee, it'll go to the whole commission, and then submitted to WMATA during the public comment period. So this worked really well last year, and the commission agrees this approach. Well, actually, so we're going to be finalizing the letter here, and then it'll be shared with the commission.
You have the authority within this body to create and
we established this. So I'd ask Renetta, you and Alan to run through the slide deck and be an opportunity for discussion. Take it away.
So starting off with some background, this chart shows the actual budgeted and proposed revenue, jurisdictional subsidy, as federal relief aid over the last 5 fiscal years, as well as the scenario for fiscal year 25. Total operating expenses for fiscal year 24 is projected at $2.4 billion. The committee, as well as the commission, has had a lot of conversation on the FY 24 operating gap, which is now moved to fiscal year 25. In the fiscal year 24 budget, the general manager has proposed several options to close the FY 24 budget, that budget, which Alan will discuss later in the presentation. Looking ahead, the federal COVID aid has been will be exhausted by fiscal year 25, and WMATA currently projects the fiscal year 25 operating budget gap at $738 million, which is expected to grow to $924 million by fiscal year 2029. This figure shows the actual budgeted and projected ridership when compared. As we are all aware, ridership declined during the pandemic, and the proposed 24 budget reflects ridership and revenue growing at a similar pace. The proposed operating budget projects a restoration of 70% of pre-pandemic ridership and $406 million in passenger revenue. Moving to the next slide. The 2024 budget proposes several fare optimization initiatives on Metro Rail, including the elimination of peak and off-peak fares. So there would be just one standard fare. The base fare would also become $2 on Metro Rail, which would match Metro Bus. The mileage rate would become 40 cents, which is a slight increase, and that would be after 3 miles. Max fare would be raised to $6.50. As to rail transfers, as well as late night and the weekend fare of $2. An additional fare optimization initiative will be the Regional Low Income Fare Program, which WMATA is set to administer, and this program will offer a discount, match the discount for seniors and customers, and customers would qualify for this program based on if. And so WMATA is also looking at some service optimization initiatives on the lines. So on the green and yellow line, trains would arrive every 6 minutes all day. And on the yellow line, trains would turn around at Mount Vernon Square. So essentially, service would run from Huntington to Mount Vernon Square and back. Orange line trains would operate about every 7 minutes during peak service, And on the bus side, a route from each jurisdiction was chosen for improved bus service. So here in Virginia, the 6 operate every 12 minutes all day, and that would go from Skyline to Crystal City. In addition, at the last board meeting, the 11 Y route was added to the docket, so we can expect to see that service come back as well.
Well, it was just added to the docket.
Just for discussion. So stay tuned. And with that, I'll pass it over to Ellen.
All right, thanks, Renetta. Continue on, how to solve the operating gaps. So Metro Link took,
Would it make sense, Mr. Chairman, to pause there
Sure.
on
Please.
the fare structure?
Yeah,
Because I really would like to have a little bit of a discussion with all of you all, just to get your thoughts on. Tomorrow was the last day we could do anything with the docket. The one
Or it goes out for here.
with that. But the way those things work, as you know, you kind of have to propose something and put it on the docket if it's going to be an option. And we can scale things back, but we have to kind of propose. So the big discussion would be whether it would be worthwhile to propose a $2.25 base fare instead of a $2 base fare. And I will say that I think the general manager very, very strongly wants the $2 base fare. What this does do, though, is it makes shorter trips the same or a little less expensive, and it makes longer trips potentially a little bit more expensive. And we do have some information on specific scenarios for sort of who's getting what. So one of the question is sort of, is it fair that the base fare goes down from peak period, but if we set it to $2.25, then it would actually be an increase for off peak. So the board could put an amendment on the docket tomorrow to advertise that. I think it would be controversial and be met with quite a bit of discussion. The other discussion is whether these other numbers are right in terms of the distance. And I think one thing that did stick out to me, and I'm sure Paul too, we have 3% of Metro Rail trips that are off-peak trips, in which the fare currently is $3.85. And because of this formula, they would get pushed into the max fare category of $6.50. So an example of one of those trips would be Vienna to Smithsonian. Currently is a $3.85 off-peak trip that goes to $6.50, and I think that's because with the raise in the mileage to 40 cents, the max fare sort of category kicks in sooner for that particular trip. So that's like a 70% increase. Shady Grove to Metro Center is another one, in case you're wondering, not just Virginia. So, you know, we don't have to address that tomorrow necessarily, but it does beg the question, you know, is that 40 cents a mile the right number? Is $6.50 the right max fare? I mean, we were trying to increase some revenue. This is a revenue raising plan overall. What was it? Have it in here, I think. 7 million. 7 million.
Not much.
So I mean, 7 million in the scheme of our budget's not a lot of money, but it's still 7 million.
But some of the reasoning behind it was we felt like we had to show state legislators and other officials who, you know, as we're thinking longer term and coming up with funding models, that, you know, we were doing our part. You know, we weren't just letting things go financially.
So there may be two questions there. Base fare, do we leave it alone and let the proposal be $2, in which case that's what it's going to be. We won't be advertising anything else. And then on the rest of the fare structure, are there other things that we might want to see?
There was some discussion about 6.
Yeah, I mean that's a viable option now. So, you know.
Something, and then I'll open up the question. So we're talking about this particular proposal would raise about 7 million a year. Is that right?
Yeah.
And So we're looking at a $738 million deficit in FY25, and that's like 1%.
Yeah, although this is the 24 where the deficit was only 184.
So it
So
would carry over, and some of it would potentially help.
maybe, but I would say I would agree with Paul on that. I don't really think it's being proposed as a revenue thing solely. Certainly, more of a simplification or sort of reset of the way that the system calculates.
And a lot of policy people are very aware, Walter, that we haven't raised fares in 6 years.
Yeah, and I guess that's
I think that's one of the issues.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of where I was going, because has anyone calculated if we would have kept up on our sort of increases over the last 5 years, where would that be? Probably a little more.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It would have been
Hard to say exactly.
probably a couple percent a year. And then don't forget that there is the reduced fare program too for low income. So
What's the cost of that?
about what was it? About
About
4 million? Yeah, about 4 million. Yeah, it is new. Yeah, it's about 4 million.
I guess my thing is just if we're doing 50% off, it just gets kind of messy with 225 because you're talking like $1.12. So
Half.
and a half. So I mean, would you consider? And I don't 250, and then it goes to $1.35. I'm not sure what the numbers roll out like, but it's just
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, when they start doing all this, it's a very sort of choreographed dance, so to speak, with equity issues and Title VI.
What we did find out though is
Yeah.
if we advertised at 225, there probably would not be Title VI problems with it. But we would have opposition from the district.
the reason to me too with the $2, it's pretty easy. Half of that's $1.
Yeah. Well, and then you have $2 on the weekends. You have $2 late night. So it's a nice.
It's even. That goes to the whole thing that we're trying to say, that we're trying to simplify. The whole thing.
So then maybe we got in this consensus we don't push for anything other than the $2. Then the question is, if we do that, that means only certain people are getting a fare increase. A very small number of those people is a large fare increase. I was just looking at some of the other trip examples. It's like some of these are in the 20, like Pentagon City to Foggy Bottom is a 5% increase. National Airport to Foggy Bottom is a 9% increase. So the other lever we have is to maybe lower 40 cent down to 37 or something like that. Randy mentioned that to us today as an option. We would not need to advertise that in the doc. 40 cents the max. We can go down from that.
Tom and you tend to running numbers.
And we could push for a lower max fare.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would make more sense to do it on the mile. Fair.
I'll have to leave the fair calculus and the political calculus and everything to you all, but I think providing the maximum number of options probably is a good idea. And if you can do it the way you're talking about, you set it, you may have the ability to go down, but I think, everybody's got to contribute to this one way or the other. So.
Yeah.
The number is so small because I think they have determined a lot of people that are in the longer distances have transit subsidies. Whether it be through the government or the employers. So.
Okay.
So I guess our direction there is we won't fight on $2. It sounds like we won't push to go up. Part of me wants to, Dave, just because I kind of want the option out there, but I don't know that we would actually do it, and it would probably generate a lot of pushback.
And honestly, if you're gonna push it up, I would go up to a bigger number.
Yeah, see that That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's that when it's worth fighting, you might have to fight for something.
Well, I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know that Randy agrees with this. I think next year you could put something on the table again. This year is more of set, more than a fair increase.
Yeah, this is really
recalibration of it, and then next year we could potentially.
That's actually a good word because this is going to be a pretty dramatic shift in the fare structure, and this is really, as Matt actually reset is a good word because it really is trying to reset and rebalance.
Maybe we save that fight if there is one.
Well, and maybe just make that explicit as well. Recognizing for what this is this year.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is like the model has a lot of elasticity to it. So as soon as you push fares up at all, they start showing lower ridership, which then depletes a lot of the revenue you gain out of it. I don't really buy that model is all that accurate, but that's for WMATA's budget purposes. That's what happens.
So, you still have the capability of addressing the Virginia issue through reducing the miles, right?
We could take the number down, and that would still be possible based on what would go to the docket that the GM's proposed, and we could take the max fare down.
Yeah, max.
It would cost us some of that $7 million, but
Yeah.
It's not much. I mean, to go from 650 to 6, I forgot what it was. It was. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'd have to close that probably through more of the several formula funding for maintenance transfer. That's about the only thing we have to do. But
And just to be clear on that point, Matt and I really pushed back on that one in particular. None of that is coming out of any state of good repair or any of the projects that are major rehabilitations or state of good repair. New.
I know that's the next part of this, so we can wait.
Okay. And I guess, yeah, my only other just note is kind of the 2025 or what still had a March.
It's just really hard to say at this point, until the government and we see. Hearing anecdotally, March 1st is sort of the deadline. A lot of people have been told at least 3 days a week. And I've heard that quietly some of the government agencies are slowly bringing people back. They've got finally have some agreements with the union. It's really the union.
But I think Walter, and Randy was pretty clear. We had some meetings in Richmond the last couple of days. Even if we had 100% ridership, even if we had, even if we had fare increases every day, we still would have hit this point.
Yeah.
We just accelerated it by a couple of years.
I was going to say, if you don't have that calculation for 25, hypothetically, if you got to 100%, what would the gap be? I think that could be very helpful in setting up the discussion about fares next year.
Even if we were at that number,
The fare revenue, it just doesn't produce enough money to move that needle that much for the I mean, I'm sure the 7 million would be less, but it wouldn't be zero by any means. So it's the structural problem of WMATA's expenses outpacing the funding that's coming in. That's
Right. Yep.
and it's been broken for some time now.
Well, we're gonna do more of the 25 talk. I know we have a few slides on 24, but
Yes.
yeah.
Do you want to come back to that? Or? Okay. So Alan, let's finish off the slides and then we'll come back.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've actually hit a lot of stuff, so I can go through this pretty quickly. As Mr. Letourneau just mentioned, on this slide, basically we have up there talking about the flexing of the federal money, of the preventive maintenance money moving. That solves some of the gap. As you can see from this table, the improved ridership, revenue growth, the fare optimization, you see those impacts as currently proposed. And as, like I said, filling that gap is with the federal formula funding for maintenance, i.e. the maintenance over. So next slide, we'll jump over into capital, and then we're going to come back to do a summary of capital and operating when we get to like some proposed comments we have. As you can see, the proposed budget is $2.4 billion in FY24 and a $14.4 billion CIP. I'm not going to read all this what's on here, but it's a lot of the work that we're pretty much well aware of. Continuing to rehab all the structures, the important systems, maintaining our facilities. There has been a lot of work redone with the platforms, a lot of work went into that, a lot of accomplishments. Track rehab, we talked about that at the very beginning, another big project coming up. And one of the other bigger ones, kind of bigger project coming up, is 8000 series rail car acquisition. I know there's a lot of work going into that. That'll be a really, really big piece of the capital budget going forward. Next slide. So this is just an interesting slide we wanted to put in there. I'm not going to read through all of it. It's in there, but basically it's what Metro has shared with us, demonstrating how they are using that dedicated funding that we fought for so much in the last several years. They're using it well, working through that state of good repair backlog and making progress in a lot of very important ways. This is just one of the ways to visualize that. Next. We talked about the maintenance work. We found out about that. Obviously, we're going to be working very closely as we have MVTC will, as we have with everybody, to make sure that we get the word out and we're communicating with folks, everything. We're going to make sure Metro holds up their side of that to make sure we're communicating early, often, and frequently, especially as we get closer to the summer. Next. Budget timeline. It's a pretty quick snapshot of where we are. Tomorrow is when the action is proposed to put out for the public hearing. And there are scheduled public hearings in, I believe, the second week of March, is what they said publicly at the meeting. We don't have exact dates yet. One of those hearings will be here in Virginia. So stay tuned for that for more details as it comes forward. Next.
Greg is on that lineup.
That's the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Oh,
Strategic plan public hearing is.
sorry. Okay. Yeah, we've got. Yeah.
There's a lot of
Like, wait a minute. I thought we were-
Mr. Chair, is that, just as a reminder, typically every year in March, we have the general manager come and brief it. Ask that invitation has gone out for Randy to join and brief NBTC at our March commission meeting. We haven't had that confirmed yet, but I know staff are working on making that happen.
NBRC tomorrow night. Hope he didn't get confused.
No, he knows the difference. No,
He does know the difference.
Exactly.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, it has to be. Hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about all of this already. Some of this basically just kind of boils it down, and obviously we'll take the feedback and discussion we had about the fair and incorporate that into it. I just want to run through really quickly. These are kind of some themes we go from year to year, just to make sure our position is abundantly clear to Metro. First one is delivering budgeted rail and bus service. Obviously, 7K issues ongoing, and that restoration process, we haven't been running what it is. We're basically pushing Metro when they safely can, getting those service levels back to what we're actually paying for. Fare simplification, we talked about that already. That's been a consistent thing that we've actually talked about in our annual report over the last several years, and how that actually can try to get riders back onto the system. Opening Potomac Yard Metro Rail Station for full revenue service. We did want to put in here a little bit of what we've heard in previous years, a concern over a high amount of maintenance funding over the operating budget. In the past many years, I think for most folks who are here, there's a trend of over-reliance on that as a budget tool, and it's just that kind of just a concern, keeping an eye on how we're using that money and how we're flexing it over. Also, the other one, the low-income fare program, we didn't talk a whole lot of detail about it, but staff generally have, I think the commission supports the goals and the concept from all the discussions you've had in the past with our annual report and other efforts we've done here. I think the concern is the implementation. It's like how it actually rolls out. Does it overlap with other programs that different jurisdictions have? There's low income, there's student passes. There's a lot of different areas where there might be some overlap. So encouraging Metro to really work closely with the jurisdictions to make sure that the money that's going into the different types of program is the maximum amount of benefit for folks out there. And then how Metro actually allocates the cost of this program to the jurisdiction is something that's come up. Obviously, down at the bottom here, we have concern about FY25, which I think we'll be talking a lot about over the next couple months. And then capital, I think we hit a lot of this. Oh, sorry, do you want to go back to? Sure.
I would say, yeah, if anybody wants to say anything about 25, it probably.
Okay, great.
The one thing I'll just say is I think, especially based on the meetings we just had, in the next couple months, there will be a more fleshed out group of scenarios that will show what will happen if we don't get additional money into the system. And that's kind of your doomsday scenarios. And then, you know, a spectrum of in between that leading up to, I think what the general manager really wants to do is show everything that could happen if we were funded at a level that he would like to be at. But there would be other options. But yeah, there would be other options. I think what we heard from Richmond is that our state stakeholders want to see that, and they want to understand very clearly what the implications of what the budget deficit does. And, you know, we told them, you know, the only lever we really have are labor costs. So we would reduce headcount and we would reduce service. How much would be part of that scenario where it would show? None of those options are. Yeah. And so then the question is, you know, we need to fix this. And of the different tools to fix it, there's sort of the short-term stopgap, throw a bunch of money at it, and then there's the structural. And the structural is more a dedicated revenue source for Metro. That is coming through a particular tax, particular fee, particular source of revenue. Who pays it, where it goes, how much it is, how it works with the district and Maryland's contributions are, all to be seen and worked out and discussed. I think our job is to sort of outline this, you know, kind of scope of the problem.
And you could have, you know, 3 different budgets, but coming up with it.
I mean, the bottom line is we're responsible for roughly a third of that.
A third of it. It's approximately about a third.
Right. So, you know.
Mr. Chair, if I could just again reminding some other work we've done in parallel, plan on doing some deep dive with consultant support to understand what are some different approaches in Virginia that can feed into this conversation, right? So what are the different mechanisms for getting the revenues that may be coming out of these different scenarios?
So I think it's going to take a lot of convincing, obviously, that particularly to the rest of the state, the same old stuff that you'll get back at you and us collectively. It's not just you.
Yeah, it's Northern
Virginia. Yeah. So you're going to have to justify what the needs are, and you're going to do this. I also think we ought to cast the net very broadly. And the role of the private sector here ought to be thought about, not just, you know, a few additional advertising things here or there, but I think I think part of the mix ought to be potential privatization of all or part of the system. So I'll just put that on the table.
Yeah, I don't know what that would look like, or how it would work, but
Well, you know, I know one scenario that former GM talked about a lot was WMATA become just a rail company.
And you have
these are the kinds of things that
Yeah.
we need, if indeed we have a structural issue, if indeed it's large, it's not, if we're going to deal with it. Now, there may be various kick the can down the road proposals.
Yes.
If we're really going to deal with it, I would hope we would cast the net very, very broadly and not just say, well, it's a regional tax or it's this, that it remains the same, that it is basically 100% public.
Privatization issue, though, David, I think is going to be a challenge because all three state or all the interstate compact, the shared investment, and that investment, the value of that asset is upwards of, I think it's like 150 billion.
I'm not talking about giving it away, but
Yeah, I know, but
what I mean.
but even for privatization, I mean that's that's significant.
And I will say we're having challenges in this region, speaking from my Loudon hat, with services that we have privatized now. We're in the second week of a strike.
I know, but we're building highways all over the place with a
Yeah, but
private partnerships.
but that's because we're charging people $20 to drive them.
Well,
So
Charged by the mile.
yeah, well, that's the Dulles agreement. Don't get me started on that. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I agree. Like, we have to be. So one other topic I'll bring up, since there's a really freewheeling discussion going on here in our quasi-public meeting. It is public meeting. Doesn't always feel that like that we all know each other. Is gaming. I mean, we heard when we were in Richmond. There was a gaming bill introduced. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it may have already been killed. It's already been killed. But some of the talking points on that were very explicit that the revenue from that could be a dedicated source for transit. So I'm not advocating. I'm just stating that was something. Yeah, that came up while we were there, and I was like, okay, exactly. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's very conceivable. Virginia has one thing, the district has something else, and Maryland has yet something else. But they too have their trust fund is got some structural cracks. It's not.
I think one of the frustrations is, we're kind of in this austere environment discussion about transit, and the Commonwealth as a whole is not in an austere place right now. Commonwealth is doing very well, has a significant surplus, and the battles in Richmond are about how to spend all the extra money they have, how much of it to give back, how much of it to invest in things. And so it's frustrating that we're kind of in this posture of, needing money very badly, and needing the investment. And, that's not across the board. I mean, the Commonwealth could have, I hate to say it this way, and it's going to get me in trouble, but they could afford to do more if that was a priority of state government. And I understand, you're right. I mean, it's the same discussion. Why are we going to give money up to Northern Virginia and this and that? But when we met with several legislators from outside the region, I do think that they understood the amount of economic activity happening around metro stations here generated income for the rest of the state.
And one of the questions we got from the secretary is, I think they're weighing, is this a transit issue or is it an economic development issue?
There are a lot of influential people in the Commonwealth. It's both.
That's exactly how we answered it. But
there are a lot of
they're trying to get their head around it.
There are a lot of influential people who are making major development investments based on the fact that Metro is going to. And so those voices are critical to this debate. It may not necessarily be the loudest voices, but
it's not COG or the Board of Trade.
Yeah. So we've thought about those things, and I think we need the feedstock. We need the scenario planning analysis first before we can really go too far. But once we have that, I think there needs to be a group sitting
I
down.
think what the general manager is doing now is they're gaming a lot of things, like anyone would, you know, any corporation would, or any pharma company would, as you're getting ready for a new product or trying to figure out how to do certain things. You know, they're going to help put that sheet together and build from that.
You have some private sector finance people involved.
I'm-
This is a
I'm-
point that I really want to, again, casting the net broadly. If it's just, I don't think it should necessarily be limited to just kind of what we've done before and just change the numbers. If it
No, it is definitely not. It's not going to be that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there will be some folks involved. I don't know exactly how they're doing that, but you know, Metro does have a financial advisor separately, but more for the capital spending and things like that.
I mean, I think I think the biggest challenge is going to be getting the right people in the room. We're going to have a serious, thoughtful discussion. Build interests at bay as best they can. No, seriously. I mean, you know, I mean, we're only going to have one shot. Just given the history of other things that have happened in the state, and BTA being one of them. You know, I mean, you know, if you go for it and you miss, it could be another 3, 4, 5 years before you can come back.
10 years.
You know, not a great thing. But the one thing the pandemic, I think, did help with is people understand the value of the asset, what it means.
So what is sort of the timetable for looking at the structural issues?
I think we got to get through this 24 budget process and not conflate them. But I think as soon as the staff is able to devote their full attention to that, which is, by the way, why it's important to deal with some of the other issues that are going on, which we can at the end, because it really is stretching very, very thin at that leadership level. But I think we got our marching orders from the secretary and others about what they want to see and when they want to see it. So I think the general manager got the message and, you know, was going to take that back to the team and work on a process where within a couple months we have all these materials produced.
Him, the speaker.
Well, we're inviting a lot of folks. Yeah, and both for a combination of a briefing and to show them some of what what's out there that they may have not seen. And all of them were very receptive to that invitation. No. I think we want to do that in
3 months. Yeah.
We want to have them. We want to have the scenarios, I think, ready by the spring and late spring and early summer, and then be having these meetings over the course of the summer.
Soon you'll be. See.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Funding or something like that. Yeah.
I think this could be another topic for a future WMATA committee meeting as well. Yeah, that we could go
Might be the only topic for a while.
Adding again, we are updating our economic value of the transit in Northern Virginia to the Commonwealth study right now. So again, as a part of all these things building into the summer, we're going to have some updated numbers beyond the 600 million a year that's kind of there right now.
And as we've seen before, I think until people actually start feeling going on in Loudoun and Fairfax in particular, and Alexandria, station, you know, they hear about it, but until they can actually see it and sense it, feel it, makes a big.
right, very good. Still need to finish your presentation.
Capital, though.
This is really, really good.
The capital runs out in FY29. That's the end of it.
That's the next one.
Next.
That's one of the ones we always put on there and ensuring we keep working closely with Metro. We do look forward to some other updates for Metro on Blue, Orange, Silver, which is a really, really big project, coming down the road. Keeping up the good work on safe and good repair. But you're right,
But why it's important is Metro needs to have the ability to plan 5, 10, 15-year programs.
quick version and just quick update process wise. So we'll take all the what we heard tonight, not all of it, but the stuff that's really focused on the FY24 budget. Take all the commentary we heard tonight and put a draft, and we'll share with here for comments, and then we'll circulate it amongst the committee. And then whenever the public comment period opens up, to Metro, we'll share it with the entire commission.
Great. All right. Thank you. Any questions, comments on anything in the presentation? Okay. Any other discussion on that topic? All right. Last item on the agenda is other items. Does anyone have any?
Yeah, let's talk for a minute about the safety commission. So Paul and I don't think either one of us have had a chance to really dig into what the safety commission discussed yesterday. I'm sure we'll be getting some briefings tomorrow at our board meeting about some of those specific things that were brought up publicly in the meeting.
I think bottom line is it was a rehash of things that
I don't think there was anything
6-8 months ago, basically. It's sort of
new. But I did want to mention, we did have kind of an extraordinary situation with the Safety Commission recently where 2 directives were issued. Ultimately, one of them was stayed. The other one ultimately was resolved as well. One related to training, one related to the 7K availability. The training issue in a nutshell was we require operators to have 38 hours of training. The way we were doing that is 8 hours were non-passenger trains, 30 hours were passenger trains. During the pandemic and because of the derailments, we had issues with train availability, and so the training staff changed that and allowed 38 hours to occur in passenger trains. The passenger train training is more advanced than the non-passenger train training. So the 8 hours we're talking about here still occurred, but they occurred just when there were passengers and when there was somebody there walking them through operating the train as they would. Those operators went out on the system. They operated for about 3 months. The MSC directive would have instructed us to remove those operators from service with 3 days notice, 65 of them total. And then we started whittling that down, which would have had significant operational impacts for about. The second thing was related to the frequency of inspections. We want to go to a 7-day inspection protocol on the 7,000 series trains from 4 days to 4 days. Even the 7 days is very, very labor intensive. It really restricts the amount of trains we can put out of the system. We believe we met the terms of the MSC's request to us to be able to do that. MSC came in and said that we had not, and so they would not allow us to move to the 7-day inspections. Following the board's pushback and the appeal, they have said to allow us to move to 7 days. The board had a press conference on Monday, Martin Luther King Day, with the general manager, in which we really outlined our concerns about the Safety Commission. And I think these particular issues that I just talked about were ultimately resolved. The real issue that we were really trying to raise was this kind of broken relationship that exists between the MSC and Metro, and the implications that it has on our ability to do things in the future. We talked at the last commission meeting about automatic train operation, and Chairman McKay asked me if that had to be a safety commission. The answer I said was yes. So, for example, if we're in this kind of broken relationship with the Metro Rail Safety Commission, it's going to be very hard to move forward on a lot of these things that we're trying to do. So our call was for a more collaborative relationship. acknowledgement that Metro could do things better in terms of communication, but not everything that Metro does is a true safety issue. Sometimes it's more of a paperwork issue and a bureaucratic issue than an actual safety threat. And we need that group to act as a regulator. So then Secretary Ports spoke about, the way the NTSB operates, findings, directives, but not interfering with operations. And so unless there's truly a directive that's issued that is earth shattering and it's
So
yeah. So we really are trying to reset that, and we were really trying to tell everybody in the region and all of our stakeholders that we need help with this relationship because it's not working. And the good news is we sort of got what we wanted short term, so that works. But I don't want that to obscure the issues that we were raising about the long term relationship because it's still there and it's still going to rear its head every so often. And we would rather not be in a situation of the board having press conferences to complain about the safety commission every 4 months. So, we need to fix this. And I'm not asking anybody in here for anything, but, it's an awareness issue. We need the commissioners themselves at MSC to understand the problem better. They have a very different version of events, and you'll hear some of that. But I think we've seen enough of what staff is doing and what our protocols are and all that. Certain things, like if there is a training error that occurred at a meeting, in a training session, then instead of the safety commission noting it and then bringing it up three months later at a safety commission meeting, why can't somebody just pick up the phone and tell Metro and say, hey, this particular instructor was using out-of-date materials? Because that's one thing that happened that they noted.
It sounded like
we had a out-of-date materials being used in one particular instance when it came to our roadway protection program. Why does that turn into a finding and a directive? Why can't, and maybe it can't, but why can't in real time somebody say, hey, you know what, something's wrong here? I mean, that's what a collaborative relationship is, not a gotcha relationship. So that's what we are trying to get to. I don't have an easy answer for how to get there, but we need some help from our federal regulators oversight, and we need some help from the appointing authorities on these different. And we did share a lot of these concerns when we were in Richmond. So,
and I think another point we wanted to make is sort of a thing that's not great when we do petition or say we want a reassessment or look back. The arbiter is the head of the safety commission.
yeah,
It's not an independent panel. It's not an independent group of 3 judges or some body, a mediator. It's the head of the safety commission.
So that issued the directive. That issued have to deal with directives too.
And that person, whoever that person is so that is another thing we want to expose. I took a lot of flack. Randy did too, but I did, for calling the executive session. But look, we didn't know we didn't know all the facts, and but we knew enough. But we didn't know if there were HR related complications here. If we are under, still the NTSB has not finalized their 7,000 series, report, and that's what these people were training on. So I made that call, stand by the call. So people criticized us for me for that, but I think it was good to have this session and then have the news conference. It ended up in a good place. Some of the Fed structural things here, but I hope that appointing jurisdiction also realize, sure that there's a way that they too can check in, sure the people that they appoint actually going on. Is there the proper flow of information coming to WMSC staff?
legal documents establishing the Metro Safety Commission? So how should they be amended? If it's not sort of a structure, if it's individuals, can a facilitator help? So tell me more about what would.
I think the arbiter issue definitely. But I think some of the things Matt highlighted are far more complicated and might be more personality and various interpretations that go way beyond what I think it's honestly a safety commission could be or should be, or how others act throughout the country.
So I haven't been able to figure out whether some of the things structurally are actually enshrined in legislation or whether they were sort of the regulatory interpretation that was.
Yeah, I think here's the problem, David. I think, so they had this original program beyond the legislation.
Yeah.
Now the arbiter thing is in the legislation. There is the petition thing is in the legislation, but what is it? Well, FTA, I guess, would have it, or DOT would have the program directive. A year or two ago, years ago, something like that, the directive was up for review. The Safety Commission submitted recommendations for changes to that directive. Teresa, our safety person, commented on those changes. None of those changes were accepted. So their directive became even stronger. So it's that document that is, I think, is causing a lot of the problems and confusion in the interpretation by the Safety Commission and what they do. And they feel like they've been empowered. And again, from what I've heard from safety professionals who know this business, that directive is like no other document that any other safety commission. In fact, there's been some suggestion that maybe they just need to be placed under. It's like they don't
have any.
They don't. So I mean, theoretically, it's the three.
So there's a certification
jurisdictions, but yeah,
no, there's a certification that exists for all of these oversight bodies through the federal government. They have chosen sort of a hands-off approach to these types of bodies, so they don't really get involved in their operations.
They don't want to perceive their.
I think one of our purposes here is to try to bring to their attention that they may want to look at some of these issues. I don't think so, but I think certainly the response that we received was helpful, just in terms of folks not immediately jumping to conclusions when the directives were issued and things like that, or at least look. Sometimes Metro may be very well be at fault, and we're not here to hide that, or
yeah, we still have work to do,
or obfuscate on those issues. But when some of these things come out and we do feel like they're unfair, then I think at least not having the region kind of adding to the chorus of was helpful. I mean, because that's what happened in this case. I think everybody was willing to listen and hear what both arguments were, and then
gave the federal delegation, particularly the four senators, are keenly aware of the issue and are too good. Very helpful in it. Yeah.
Which you can share.
No, thank you. I know. Appreciate the updates. I think it's very helpful. Anything else on that topic? Okay, there is one other thing I need to go back on the enhanced maintenance work. One request.
oh, this is the summer thing.
Yeah, the summer thing. One request that I got, and this is with my Fairfax County executive. Given that ridership peaks basically going up to July 4th, and a lot of people go out of town, and ridership tends to change, if Metro could look at the possibility of extending or delaying for 1 month.
So we asked the question, if you could go to the other map that shows everything. No, because they're moving over to, and I hate to say it, but that project is, well,
critical.
it's worse. Like, it's more impactful
Okay.
than what. So we did ask that question. Why does it have to be this time period?
Right, because ridership trails off.
It does. August is a slower time, so they've timed it to be.
Show the rail that has the biggest crack in it.
Okay. No, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
you know,
Understood.
and
All
we did it.
right, anything else before the committee? All right, then we are adjourned as of 7:12 p.m. Thank you very much.